So to truly understand mystical meditation, we first need to have a foundational understanding of light. The reason why is that we need to understand what separates mystical meditation from more popular forms of meditation as a whole. And to understand light, we need to have a general high-level understanding of the spiritual path as a whole, and without getting into dogma or cultural lenses or lineage perspectives, we're just going to start with consciousness. We have consciousness. Okay? And consciousness in its primordial form is eternal, containing all potential. So everything in here is the substance that makes up infinity. Now, when consciousness becomes aware of itself, it splits itself into two, because we have the observed and the observer. From here, we have awareness. We have consciousness and awareness. We can look at the story of creation, for example, and we see that the first act of creation was let there be light. Now, light is the manifestation of your awareness. We have to remember that anything and everything has both a subtle and non-subtle manifestation of itself. There cannot be one without the other. As above, so below, as within, so without. Light is the physical manifestation of awareness. And in order for something to become a physical manifestation, it goes through levels of densities, wavelengths, frequencies, etc. This is why we have visible light and non-visible light. So we have eternity, which is consciousness, and we have infinity. Let's do that. Eternity. And then we have infinity. So if light is the manifestation of your awareness, it is the infinite manifestations of eternity. Here is where we have the eternal becoming the infinite. The light, being awareness in its most subtle and purest form, begins to shine and project itself through time, space, and the realms of creation. This is where we have the activity of creation beginning to unfold. This starts here in the causal. The causal is the realm of intent and light. In the causal, the awareness begins to take a structure based around its intention for creation and life. So in the causal, as a whole, we have a causal structure that begins to form. And for lack of a better color, I'm just going to do that. The causal structure is the intention of the awareness for creation and life and physical manifested experience. So, to review, we have consciousness, which is substance becoming aware, and that awareness has an intent which begins the movement. This begins to take on structure and form as it moves through time and space. And if we can imagine for a moment that if we have the causal here, and then next we have the astral world, so there's 4 worlds. And the astral is time, space, and energy patterns. This is also where we have mental, emotional, filters, and energy. So as this begins the descent process to go from the above into the below, from the eternal into the physical manifested individual or individual life form, it's moving through these realms of creation. And so here is where, in the astral, where we start to have the supernatural world. It is a world of energy, structure, form, mind, and emotions. When there is enough energy that begins to be accumulated, and the conditions for the physical manifestation occur, it becomes solid. And this is where we have the material. So now that we have been able to, at a high level, break down this movement from eternal consciousness to infinite awareness to light into the causal realm of the causal structure, and to see that as that light projects itself through time and space, it begins to accumulate structure and form. If you can think about it as a beam of light that is being projected through multiple lenses. All of those lenses are the various filters of the infinite fractal that is taking that pure, eternal, infinite light and shaping it through different levels of density, different perspectives, the impressions that we accumulate in life, the energies that are in the material world. So we have this kind of infinite kaleidoscopic effect that goes from unity, consciousness into individual manifested lifetime or moment, life moment. So as mystics, well, first, before we get into that, the spiritual paths are all focusing, are like spokes on a wheel, right? So in the middle, we have source, God, eternity, right? And all of this is obviously a part of it, but all these different traditions are trying to get to the center of it through their own different way. And they have their own unique perspectives, they have their own traditions, their own rituals, their own cultures, because where they are in time and space and geographic location, there's going to be cultural, societal lenses that are going to shape the awareness of the spiritual seekers in terms of their direct experience of consciousness and the divinity and the sacred and all the things that manifest from that. So we have all these different traditions. We'll just kind of put Buddhism. I'm a terrible speller, so we'll put Buddhism, we'll put Christianity, and then we'll put like the shamanic, indigenous traditions, we'll put like the plant medicine traditions. I don't know, we'll even put like Islam. Right? So there's all these different ways to get to the center of consciousness. And all these spiritual paths are following what has been passed down to them through the direct experience of an individual who has become awakened and has passed on his path for how they began to realize the eternity of consciousness. And they've had those direct spiritual experiences that allow them to increase their awareness, to become more conscious of consciousness itself. And as a result, they become transformed both inwardly and outwardly as a result of it, because that is the alchemical process of spirituality. There is a equal exchange. Anything that's happening inside of you is manifesting externally. Anything that's happening externally is having an influence inside of you. These are simultaneous occurrences and operations, right? If you ask any real laboratory alchemist or any hermetic alchemist, they're going to talk to you about this, that the alchemist is going through those changes internally in their own emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, energetic worlds that they're doing in the laboratory to the material itself. So now that we've kind of looked at this wheel of spirituality, and at a high level, we can say that the intention here is to get to the center of this spiritual experience, of this spiritual nature of awareness and consciousness. And then you can start to see, if you start to take the light that I was talking about just previously, you can start to see that all these traditions talk about light as there being a unifying factor there. It's because light is what allows us to be aware of these experiences, because it is both the fundamental makeup of our own awareness, it is also the infinite manifestation of that eternal conscious substance, that prima materia, and it creates that feedback loop so that we can actually have this experience, because we are not separate from this eternal substance of consciousness. We are a infinite, finite manifestation of that, and the way that we are able to realize that is through the expansion and the cultivation of awareness itself. So now that we have looked at that, we can go back to these four worlds. We have the eternal, we have the causal, we have the astral, and we have the physical. Now, some of you guys might say, well, Taylor, there's actually 7 worlds, and all these different traditions, the occult traditions, like the Western magical, they're all going to break up all these things. You look at Buddhism, they talk about 10,000 states of mind. They're talking about all these different lokas, all these different bardos, all these things. You can have infinite breakdowns of these different perspectives, but we're going to keep it simple, because I like simple, because I'm just a Western California boy, I like simple. So we have the eternal, so this is consciousness. We have the substance of the prima materia. Okay, and then we have light, infinity. Now the soul is here in the causal, because the eternal substance manifests itself through its awareness, and this is where we have the eternal becoming the individual. So we have the infinite manifesting itself in finite form. All right, so this is where your soul, your little ball of light, that is, let's do that. Boop. That is your essence. It's your essence because that is the purest, undifferentiated, unfiltered spark of life and force that is manifesting your physical experience of life. That is your essence, is you. You're a little ball of light, and at your essence, you are pure awareness. So if your awareness is both what you are, it is both the essence of your being, then how do you get all of these individual character traits? Well, I'm glad you asked. So as your awareness begins to move down through these realms, you start to pick up impressions. These impressions leave, it's kind of like a thumbprint in a way. These impressions leave different modifications or filters on the, I guess you could say, the outer shell of the essence itself, right? And so as your awareness is projected from the essence through those impressions, we start to see things slightly differently. Now, if you want to make it very easy on yourself, astrology is the study of phenomena as it occurs through time and space. So you can look at it from this perspective, and I think it's a very easy perspective to have. When your spirit first takes breath in the physical body, that first moment of life, your natal chart is the cosmic thumbprint. So all these energies in the physical and astral time and space continuum have a filtration effect to itself, and your essence is passing through that time and space, that moment in time of space with the specific energies in these specific positions all accumulating on each other, and your essence is now taking its first breath of material life. So your natal chart is your first impression of life through the energetic patterns of time and space. Meta, huh? Okay. So then we begin to grow up and we have our daily life experiences, we have our maturity, we have the things that make us who we are. So these are what we would call the impressions that we pick up in this lifetime, right? Meaning that they are who we are as the individual character in this life, but they are not essential to our nature as we are as a true essential self being. I could probably have said that a little bit easier, but I think you get the point. These physical experiences are not essential to who we are as a energetic soul of awareness. Does that make sense? We have these infinite and eternal aspects of our being which come from beyond this lifetime. There's this one author, and he talks about the essential self. And he says the essential self is the continued maturation of the being at its essential soul level as it's processed and accumulated all the experiences in the past lifetimes or future lifetimes. It's that material going through the alchemical evolution of the soul. And so we can look at the essential self being the purest essence of who we are. The purest part of ourself is that luminous awareness, right? And then throughout the experiences in our individual lifetime, we accumulate these mental, emotional impressions. We can see it in the way that our nervous system responds to specific things. There are traumas, or there are these experiences that we've picked up physically, emotionally, mentally, energetically from this lifetime that begin to filter our awareness and our pure direct experience of consciousness itself. So this is why, like, people doing nervous system work, they're like, wow, this is not actually mine. These are just things that are stuck in this electromagnetic body that have not been processed from earlier in this lifetime. But if we can use our awareness to heal, fix, expand those things, then we can also use our awareness to go up and experience the direct essence and essential nature of who we are. Now, let's get back to the whole spiritual path thing. In the physical world, we have experiences, right? And this is where people are like, life is pain and suffering. And, personally, I don't vibe with that. I think life is beauty and joy. That's just the perspective that I wish to hold, and that's what I want to focus on. So that's what manifests more of, right? And then you have the astral, and this is like the supernatural. Okay, so people at some point become spiritually curious. They're like, wow, there has to be more to life. And then they go on. People become curious about the spiritual nature of their being, of life. And then they say, well, there has to be more to this. And then, you have some traditions that focus entirely here in the astral. And this is where you have like witchcraft is like focusing on using like the different elements of nature and the different energies of nature. And then you have like the magical traditions. We'll just put the occult traditions here. And so they're looking to work with all these different energies so that they can either shape, manifest, control, or alter their physical experience. So they're working here on the astral to influence the physical. And then you have, and I'm not judging or downgrading any of these traditions. I'm just using these as easy examples, right? Because when you go deeper into these traditions, they ultimately do touch on these higher realms, on these higher dimensions. So, and then you have like the yogic traditions, and the yogic traditions are like, hey, we're going to start you here in the physical, and we're just going to gradually shift you up, and we're going to kind of build this foundational tower, this ladder of experience, right? So that you have like the asanas, and the asanas focus on the physical body, getting you prepared to sit in long forms of meditations, and then they do pranayama, and then pranayama begins to acclimate the pranic flow in the body. This is now working in the astral, right? And then you have the more deeper meditative states of samadhi, and that's where you're starting to merge your awareness into the causal realm directly. Like Salvakalpa Samadhi is the direct experience of eternity through the individual. So it's like infinite awareness perceiving eternity directly. So it's like the drop experiencing the ocean through the lens of the drop. And so that happens like right kind of there in that borderline causal eternal, because you're still looking up, right? And then you have like Nirvikalpa Samadhi, and Nirvikalpa Samadhi is when your consciousness has just merged with this eternal, with eternity directly, and you're not an individual, you're just kind of you're just the ocean, right? And then you have what they call the classical enlightenment, and the classical enlightenment is when you are now merged your individual ball of light with eternity, and you are now eternity manifesting and experiencing life through the drop. You're the ocean experiencing life through the drop. And at that point, you're just kind of always here and always here simultaneously. You have merged the above and the below to such an extent that they are one and the same, and you are aware and conscious in every single realm altogether. And what I can tell you is that as you begin to expand your awareness, you become aware of these things, of different experiences, different energy patterns in these different worlds, right? So they have like first attention, second attention, third attention, fourth attention, and so on. And so as you develop your mystical awareness, your mystical abilities, you start to become more aware of what is going on in these different dimensions of awareness. Ain't that a trip? Okay, so now to this whole spiritual path. The mystic has an experience of light. And they're like, yo, that's wild. That's changed me. I feel really good. What is that? The mystic begins to go into light through mystical meditation. Now, what mystical meditation is merging your awareness with light directly, because they are one and the same. However, first you see light, and that is your state of awareness in that moment. Okay? 2, you go deeper into light. And because the light is the purest essence of you, it begins to dissolve. Let's do this. Let's draw you, and then here's like your entire world, right? And there's like all this stuff in there, because this is like your mind, your emotions, your energy, right? There's you. So when you start to meditate and experience the light, it begins to dissolve these things. You go into light by stopping thought, and you stop thought by going into light. It is a feedback loop, a paradoxical feedback loop. So the more time you spend in light, the more these things that are not the truest essential part of you start to become dissolved. You can look at it from the karmic perspective. So you've picked up like all these karmas, right? And some of them are the result of your actions, and some of them are the result of other people's actions. And when you go into light, you begin to experience your awareness through these different dimensions, right? So I said you first experience the astral, and then the causal, and then the eternal. And the astral light may appear at first like kind of cloudy because your mind isn't really focused and quiet yet. So that is a filter that the light is projecting itself through, right? And then it may become more brighter, and you'll have some senses and sensations because those are all part of the astral, which is more dense but not fully physical or material, energetic patterns. And then as you begin to go higher into the causal realm, you start to experience white, gold, clear. And then there's some spots in between where you'll get some like deep, pretty blues and some purples and all these things. And all these colors of light are aspects of your desires, right? Or aspects of your being. So my teacher said that when you encounter the blue light is the desire of your incarnation, or your desire to be an incarnated individual. Now, I've still sorting through a lot of these from my own experience, but what I can tell you is that the more stillness you cultivate in your internal world, the more clear, brighter, and luminous the light becomes, because you are still. You don't have all of these things bouncing around on your physical, mental, emotional, energetic filters that are disrupting the clarity of your essence. All right, so the light begins to have a cleansing effect. Effect on the mind, the aura, the emotions, and it begins to heal the body even. Okay, so the light begins to fundamentally remove the things that are not your true self. Now, I'll give you an example of this. Have you ever experienced like a want or an interest or a desire around something specific, and then only to find out like years later, you're like, wow, I actually didn't want that at all. Like that was something that somebody told me I should want. That's something that somebody told me I should do, or something to that capacity. That is an example. That is an example of a impression on your being that you have misunderstood or misidentified as your own intention or desire for your lifetime. So when you begin to meditate in the light, and you begin to meditate in light through mystical meditation, it begins to remove these things that are not inherently you. So you begin to have a calmer, clearer mind. You begin to have a higher vibrational energy emitting from you, because you're not drawing energy from the physical world. You're now drawing energy from a much higher, purer place. So it begins to reinforce your aura. And then when we leave our meditation and we go into mindfulness, that's where we begin to take that energy and fortify our energy body as a whole. This is why mindfulness and meditation are the twin practices. One, you have a yin and the other is yang, but really they contain both one and the same, but it's just what we are shifting our perspective to be the focus. So meditation is stopping thought and going into light. Mindfulness is stopping thought and going into light, but we're doing an active activity. So if meditation, we're sitting there, stopping our thought, going into light, where it's that yin practice, or we're just sitting there in stillness. And then the mindfulness is where we still keep that focused meditative mind, but we are going into light as we are doing a physical activity. And that begins to strengthen not only our mind, our energy body, and it has a lot of really good benefits. You begin to learn quicker, you become more skilled at something. There's a ton of benefits to it. I love it. So, okay, so from here, we have now talked about what happens when we go into light. We've talked about the light as a whole, talked about awareness. Now, the path of mysticism. Mysticism is The path of mysticism is your individual direct spiritual experience of life, light, and awareness. If you were to look up mysticism online, they would give you a definition that's like something along the lines of like merging your awareness or consciousness with God, with the absolute, with eternity. And it's essentially the same thing. We're just using different semantical wordplay here to play on that. But mysticism is about you learning to become more aware of yourself, to expand your awareness, and to actually move that awareness into a higher vibrational state of energy, luminosity, and consciousness so that you can directly experience these quote-unquote spiritual experiences, and then you can reflect on those and understand from your own individual vantage point and point of view what they mean, how they changed you, so on and so forth. Because a lot of spiritual traditions and religions, for that matter, operate on the trust me bro mentality. And as mystics, we say, okay, there's probably some truth there, but I want to experience that for myself. So the mysticism is a very sovereign path. There's several practices that work for everybody, and you engage with these practices and you begin to go down this path of mysticism so that you can ultimately experience the clear light of eternity directly, so that you can merge your awareness, which is just the awareness, with consciousness, with eternity, so that you can go back up. Where we go? So that you go back up through these dimensions from an individual manifestation of an individual lifetime into merging with the absolute, the Tao, God, source, consciousness, eternity. That is the path of mysticism. And the most direct path that I have personally found is mystical meditation. By engaging in mystical meditation, you are not only training your attention, you're not only getting access to more energy that is going to benefit all areas of your life, you're learning to actually fundamentally play on the mechanics of you're learning to play on the mechanics of awareness and consciousness itself. So it's all about direct experience. The more you expand your awareness, the brighter luminosity, the more light you experience, the more you become true to yourself. Because that is the whole point, in my opinion. That is part of the whole point of spirituality, is to have direct experiences with the sacred and become true to yourself in the process. To thy own self be true. Because most people don't know who they are. So they look in spirituality and then they find all these other teachers or beings, understandings of this eternal awareness, and then they begin to follow what has worked for those people when not actually considering that they have an individual path inside of them that is waiting for them to be uncovered. So when you engage the path of mysticism, you start to become more true to yourself, because the light removes the facets that are not yours. They remove the mental structures, the modifications. It starts to remove the impressions and the desires that are not a part of your true essence. So when you become more true to yourself, that is where the light, or God, or source, or eternity begins to flow through you, because you have less filters and blocks that are holding back the full force of sacredness, the full force of divinity, the full force of life itself. We use these terms like sacredness, divinity, God, because we began to understand that there is a sort of humility and respect and reverence for this process. And while that is very much true, we need to understand that at the core of this, we are looking to understand who we are before the world told us who to be. And as a result of going deeper into that, we have contact with the sacred, because it is only through the divine grace, as some traditions say, that that healing, that transformation occurs. And so while it is you, you are also an individual being having an individual lifetime, and you are beginning to work your way through this universal cosmic evolutionary process of cultivating and understanding your awareness. And the more you begin to see how connected you are with everything else through the web of awareness and consciousness, through the dance of eternity and infinity, you realize that you are all one, and that you are an aspect of everything else. You are connected to all of these things. And so if you have respect and love for yourself, and you realize that you are not separate from these other manifestations of infinite eternal light, then you, as a result, will respect all forms of life, all forms of animate and inanimate life, because you are not separate from these things. So it begins to reveal this interconnected web of consciousness, and that you are not separate from anything else. And if you come to love and respect and accept yourself, you inherently, in order to fulfill that and embody that, you will learn to love, respect, and cherish everything else that is perceived to be outside of you in this material world. And then as you begin to expand your awareness through higher dimensions, through higher states of awareness where there's less density, you begin to see that everything is just a play of light and sound and eternal conscious awareness. So anyways, we're going to continue now. So mysticism is your own direct spiritual experiences of life, light, and awareness. And so when we begin mystical meditation, we begin to quiet our mind, we begin to stop thought, and we begin to bring more we begin to expand our awareness, and as a result of expanding our awareness, we become more filled with light. And light is our awareness, and that begins to cleanse us and begins to sharpen our attention to our true self. And what happens when you get in touch with the true self? Well, it's really easy. You get to quickly figure out what you like, what you don't like. You start to find what comes easy and natural to you, and you start to become more aligned with the Dharma of your life, with the truth of your life, the truth of your being. And so I think that's something a lot of people are looking for when they explore spirituality and religion and consciousness, is they're just trying to find the truth of who they are and the purpose of their life. And you begin to recognize that the more you become in touch with your own essential self, with the light within. Now you can understand why Namaste, the light within me, respects and honors the light within you, because it is the same light. We are just a different, infinite, fractal manifestation of that same eternal light. So on the path of mysticism, there's really three core practices. There's mystical meditation, there is mindfulness, and then you have introspective contemplation. So we have going into light, we have light flowing through you via action. That's a good enough one for now. Okay. And then you have introspective contemplation, which is self-reflection and digesting your experience. Because it's not about what somebody's telling you is the truth, it's about you understanding the truth of your own experience. And so these are essentially the three practices of a mystic. Man, I do not have great handwriting on this iPad. In general, I don't have good handwriting, but working on it. Okay, so these are the 3 practices of a mystic, and that is why the mystic understands that the light is their home. So you have these different levels of consciousness, right? Levels of consciousness. You have sentience, okay, where people are, it's like people are just aware. You're just aware. Not really self-aware, but you're just kind of like living, right? So I would, like 98, 99% of people on 98, 99% of humans are probably living in this sentient state, right? And then, you have those couple million people that like start to meditate, and then they explore spirituality, right? And they're on this like transitionary evolutionary path, right? And then the mystic starts going into light. And mystical awareness is when you have experienced and recognized the light as yourself, as the manifestation of your own awareness. And when you begin to go into light on a daily basis at will, that is where you start to become a mystic. You can go into light, you can move past the impressions and the modifications, and you begin to have the direct spiritual experience at will, because that's who you are. There's nothing separate. It's just these perceived impressions, filters, and life's experiences that cause the illusion of separateness. The light is all about dissolving the illusion of separateness. Okay, so the mystic gets to experience light at will. And then they go on, and really this is not a horizontal, this is actually like a, let's do this. Okay, so it's like, because you're going into a higher dimension. And when I say like higher dimension, I'm literally just saying a less dense manifestation of light, sound, and matter. Okay, so we have like the material here, right? And then we have like the astral over here, and then we have causal, and then we have like eternal, which is where it just goes pop, and there's nothing vibrating there. It's just eternal consciousness and substance. When something begins to vibrate, it begins to descend back down through the creation process. See how this is starting to work now here? Okay. We have this kind of like horizontal and vertical, kind of spiritual evolutionary pattern. A lot of religions, focus on this like vertical path of just like living a better life, teaching you how to be a decent human, social, societal, cultural values, etc. But the mystic, the esoteric practitioner, the shaman, the magician, the witch, the sorcerer, they all want to experience this directly for themselves. And so they begin this, higher trajectory, evolutionary state. And they go into that higher space of awareness and attention. All right. So the mystic begins to identify as the light directly, because that is their awareness. And the awareness is what gives you all these faculties of perception. And as the mystic begins to develop, then they enter the realm of self-realization, liberation, and enlightenment. And this is like a whole another topic that I don't want to get into right now, because the main thing that I want to share, convey, and express is that the path of the mystic is the path of sovereignty. It's the path of spiritual sovereignty. you begin to be, you start to, okay, you get to know the truth of who you are, the direct experience of your essence, and alignment with your Dharma and purpose. All right. And then when you know the truth of who you are, you inherently know who/what you are not. So you stop doing all the things that are not you, that you don't want to do, that are not in alignment with your intention and vision of life. You have the direct experience of your essence and who you are inside, and then you just stop being and stop confusing yourself with all these cultural, societal, religious, parental expectations, because you know who you are at your deepest level. And then as you become more aligned with your purpose and your Dharma and the truth of your life, everything just begins to flow, because you are being the most natural expression of yourself. You are being the intentional hand of God in a way. I know it's going to sound kind of crazy, but you are just living the purpose of your life. It's like a bird flies, you do your Dharma. A horse runs, you do your Dharma. Whatever that is, you just start to embody the full essence of your being, and your expression is your art. Your expression is what you're leaving the world. The expression is that beauty and joy of life, of God flowing through you. So this is why I care about the path of the mystic, because it allows you to experience the fullness of your being. It allows you to expand your awareness through multiple different facets of dimensionality and reality. You begin to become more of who you are. And when you become more of who you are, it is easier to make the decisions and the choices in the world so that you can fully create the life that you want to create. And then as this relates to entrepreneurship and business, you are just doing your Dharma, and you're figuring out a way to provide an income for yourself or create your own prosperity as a result of being who you are at your essential nature and fulfilling the purpose for your lifetime, which is your Dharma. So the path of the mystic helps you understand who you are, what you are. Okay, so we lost a little bit of audio here for 30 seconds, but what I was saying is that it shows you the purpose of your life. And then when you know the purpose of your life, you can then engage in the act of building a Dharma business, which is learning how to create prosperity and income for yourself, doing your purpose, your Dharma, what you're supposed to actually be doing in this lifetime, rather than relying on other means of income so that you can fully dedicate yourself to fulfilling your Dharma to the best of your ability and giving your gifts to the world. That is why I care about the path of the mystic. So, meditate in light, mystical meditation, become aware of your truest essence and self, see the light as you, and then as a result of that, you become more sovereign in your life's expression and your life's choices. And you just become the fullest embodiment and presence of your eternal nature and Dharma that you came to fulfill in this lifetime. So that's what we got for today, fam. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the comments below. Maybe I'll do Q&A videos over the next couple weeks. But this is essentially my entire thesis on mysticism, meditation, mystical meditation, and the path of the mystic. So thanks so much for tuning in. I really enjoyed this, and I will talk to you guys all later. And check in soon for more videos, podcasts, and all that. Cheers.